The Trump administration gave auto manufacturers a slight reprieve on Tuesday by reducing the impact of tariffs on their products.
For Canadian auto parts maker Brendan Lane, the Trump tariffs have been a roller coaster of turmoil.
For decades, union workers believed that voting for pro-labor politicians would protect their jobs and futures. That belief just collapsed in what may be the biggest act of labor betrayal in American history. 3,000 United Auto Workers members found out their own government was funding their unemployment. The dues they paid, the candidates they backed, the strikes they endured, all of it meant nothing when foreign governments offered bigger incentives than American workers could match. So how did this happen? How many other U.S. industries are quietly being sold off? And what does this mean for you? Canada's electric vehicle boom is a perfect example. Your tax dollars didn't just subsidize new cars, they financed an industrial surrender. The Windsor Assembly shutdown wasn't just a business hiccup, it exposed a $15 billion Canadian deal to lure Stellantis. Ottawa put up $10 billion. Ontario added $5 billion, marking the biggest auto subsidy in Canada's history. Volkswagen secured $13 billion for its battery plant. Honda lined up $15 billion for expansion. LG Energy Solution promised huge new battery output. Canada wasn't just attracting investment, it was buying it outright. At the heart of this plan was the Stellantis LG Next Star battery plant in Windsor. 2,500 jobs, $5 billion in investment, and a shot at making Canada the top EV hub in North America. Lawmakers boasted about leading an industrial revolution. The money flowed freely, and the impact redrew the map of North American manufacturing. But the real deal-making didn't happen in the open. While Americans focused on tariffs and political slogans, Canadian officials quietly crafted backroom deals to shift production north. Mark Carney told Parliament bluntly, "We didn't steal American jobs, we built what America wouldn't." This wasn't just talk, it was a statement of economic independence. While Washington got stuck in gridlock, Ottawa streamlined approvals, locked in energy prices, and tailored workforce training to industry needs. Doug Ford, Ontario's premier, promised stability, something American policy couldn't guarantee. Suddenly, political certainty mattered more than cheap labor. Across the river, Detroit woke up to a harsh new reality. 40 years of auto partnerships vanished overnight. Union leaders scrambled for answers, lawmakers demanded explanations, and local families who'd built cars for generations were left questioning the loyalty of brands they helped build. These weren't just jobs, they were the backbone of communities. Ripple effects spread fast. Suppliers lost contracts. Trucking companies lost routes. Cross-border trade relationships dissolved. Angry calls flooded congressional offices as people asked how American automakers could walk away from American workers. Then came the final blow. The 25% tariff, the so-called nuclear option. Trump's tariffs on Canadian and Mexican auto imports were meant to protect American jobs by making foreign cars expensive. Instead, they blew up the entire supply chain overnight. Stellantis halted production in Canada and Mexico within hours, laying off thousands. U.S. parts plants shut down too. The policy meant to bring jobs home ended up wiping them out. Decades of integrated supply chains couldn't be rebuilt with a speech. Cars assembled in one country used parts made in two others. That's how modern manufacturing works. The tariffs broke it all. Here's the bitter irony. The very voters these policies were meant to help, rural Americans who depend on pickup trucks, were hit hardest. Ram trucks built in Mexico now cost thousands more. Construction crews saw equipment costs skyrocket just as infrastructure spending was supposed to boost them. Small businesses relying on fleet trucks faced sudden budget crises. The vehicles that symbolized American self-reliance became casualties of American protectionism. In the end, the promises, the votes, the dues, they weren't enough. American workers paid the price for deals they never saw coming. Meanwhile, pickup trucks made up 20% of the auto market, with nearly 3 million sold yearly. Republican voters were twice as likely as Democrats to own one. Ironically, the same political coalition that demanded trade protection was hit hardest by its fallout. Ford's F-Series trucks, built in the U.S., seemed safe, but Canadian-made engines meant added costs. Modern manufacturing's tight integration made purely domestic production impossible. Within weeks, truck-dependent regions saw empty dealer lots. Construction groups warned of rising project costs. Rural communities that had backed tariffs now felt their sting. In corporate boardrooms, the real reckoning began. Stellantis had to choose, stay or shift. For Chairman John Elan, the question wasn't tariffs but trust. The European parent company had poured billions into North America, but U.S. political turmoil threatened that investment. Internal memos showed execs doubting America's reliability for long-term manufacturing. Stellantis didn't just pause production, it repositioned. Canada offered subsidies and stability. Washington offered threats and chaos. Stellantis, owner of Jeep, Ram, Dodge, and Chrysler, owed more to global shareholders than to American politics. Mexico kept supplying Latin America, Canada stayed steady, and U.S. plants started looking like relics, not the future. Behind the scenes, internal memos told the story. Washington's trade gamble was backfiring. Republicans faced a no-win choice: defend tariffs killing local jobs or defy a president whose base demanded protectionism. Early unity cracked under economic pain. Rust Belt senators got calls from laid-off voters who had once cheered the tariffs. House Democrats saw the damage cross party lines. Unions split between protecting factories and saving what jobs were left. The White House struggled to explain supply chains that didn't match "America First" slogans. Small business owners demanded answers for rising costs. The fallout hit every American family. For workers, the betrayal was personal. Generations had believed a job in an auto plant meant security. Michael Rodriguez, whose family worked at Windsor Assembly for decades, watched that promise vanish overnight. UAW halls that once celebrated wage wins now held crisis meetings. Veterans who served their country and then built its vehicles felt doubly abandoned by patriotic corporations and politicians whose policies killed their jobs. Whole communities faced an identity crisis. Pride in American auto work and quality was fading. Meanwhile, across the border, Canada's Unifor union found itself both victim and victor. Windsor suspension threatened jobs, but Ottawa's subsidies promised stability U.S. workers no longer had. Unifor and the UAW built cross-border solidarity. Canadian workers offered support and strategy. A trade crisis turned into a new era of North American labor unity, spreading from autos to steel, energy, and transport. This retail collapse cut deeper. America's auto identity was fracturing. Jeep, once a wartime icon, became a symbol of betrayal. Veterans groups warned about losing control of critical manufacturing. Rural buyers found foreign substitutes couldn't match Jeep's American roots. Outdoor and off-road communities lost not just vehicles but entire lifestyles. National security questions loomed as leaders saw how fragile supply chains had become. Confidence in America's industrial strength sank. The auto crisis was becoming a national crisis, about who America is and whether it can still build for itself. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland made it clear. Now was the time to lock in the investment and high-paying jobs to build the green economy. Volkswagen's $13 billion St. Thomas plant would be the biggest battery factory in the West. Honda's $15 billion expansion would anchor a homegrown supply chain. Canada's edge was its resources, huge lithium reserves, major nickel mines, steady cobalt supplies. While others scrambled for imports, Canada built a self-sufficient EV industry. Resource control turned into geopolitical power. Countries realized EV production depended on critical minerals, not just making cars. Canada had almost everything it needed, while others faced fragile supply lines vulnerable to politics, disasters, or price shocks. Supply chain security became a national security issue. The shift went far beyond cars. The U.S. wasn't just losing factories, it was losing the future. American EV market share shrank while foreign automakers grew through Canadian deals. Chinese firms like BYD gained ground. European brands set up shop in Toronto and Montreal, bypassing American politics. Canada and Mexico increasingly coordinated without Washington. Border towns that once thrived on U.S.-led trade adapted to new partners. Transport routes shifted to serve direct Canada-Mexico flows, cutting out the middleman. The EV boom wasn't just about cars, it was reshaping global power. Countries with resources and real plans were securing the future. Those leaning on old advantages were learning that real leadership takes more than slogans and force. Could America have stopped this? Or is the real question, what will Canada conquer next? This was just the beginning. Hit that subscribe button and buckle up. Digital Garage has so much more in store.